In the opulent glow of Manhattan's finest restaurant, a smug Chinese billionaire leaned back in his chair, his entourage erupting in laughter as he hurled insults at the unassuming black waiter in Mandarin, assuming no one else could understand. But when the waiter turned, his eyes sharp and calm, and replied flawlessly in the same language, the room fell silent. The tables had turned in an instant. The sun dipped below Manhattan's jagged skyline, casting a warm amber glow over the Upper East Side. Le Prestige, a Michelin-starred restaurant nestled among boutique galleries and high-rise condos, stood as a beacon of opulence, its glass facade reflecting the city's frenetic pulse. Inside, the dining room was a symphony of elegance. Crystal chandeliers dangled like frozen starlight, casting prismatic flecks across crisp white tablecloths. The air carried the rich aroma of truffle-infused sauces, roasted lamb, and aged wines, mingling with the soft clink of fine china and the murmur of conversations among New York's elite. Waiters glided silently, their black vests pressed to perfection, while a jazz quartet in the corner played a mellow rendition of Moonlight Serenade. The restaurant was more than a place to dine. It was a stage where power, wealth, and status performed their nightly dance. The clientele mirrored the setting's grandeur, a Hollywood actress in a shimmering gown, a Wall Street tycoon barking into a discreet earpiece, a UN diplomat sipping champagne with calculated poise. Every table held a story of influence, each guest a player in the city's high-stakes game. The servers, trained to anticipate every whim, moved with a precision that bordered on choreography, ensuring no glass went unfilled, no plate lingered too long. Le Prestige was a microcosm of privilege, where the wealthy came to see and be seen, and where the staff, often invisible, bore witness to the raw undercurrents of human nature, ambition, arrogance, and occasional kindness. Tonight, the restaurant buzzed with an electric anticipation. A major tech merger was the talk of the town, and rumors swirled that a Chinese billionaire, fresh from Shanghai, had booked the prime table overlooking Central Park. The staff whispered about his reputation, ruthless, charismatic, and fiercely proud. The kitchen, a controlled chaos of clanging pots and shouted orders, prepared for a high-profile evening, with chefs perfecting plates of caviar blinis and Wagyu beef. The head sommelier, a wiry Frenchman named Pierre, curated a selection of vintages, including a 1982 Chateau Lafite Rothschild, priced at $3,000 a bottle. Every detail was meticulous, from the polished silverware to the fresh orchids adorning each table, ensuring Le Prestige lived up to its name. This was the stage for an unfolding drama, one that would pit wealth against wisdom, prejudice against poise. The restaurant's opulent calm belied the tension about to erupt, a clash of cultures and assumptions that would resonate far beyond its gilded walls. As the evening unfolded, the hum of conversation grew louder, punctuated by laughter from a nearby table where a group of young influencers snapped selfies with their cocktails. At the bar, a journalist named Sarah Klein, her notebook tucked discreetly in her purse, sipped a martini, her eyes scanning for a story. She had a knack for spotting moments of truth amid the artifice, and tonight her instincts were on high alert. The stage was set, the players assembling, and the spotlight was about to shine on an unexpected hero. Li Wei's entrance. Li Wei strode into Le Prestige with the confidence of a man who owned the world. At 52, he was the embodiment of success, his lean frame draped in a bespoke Armani suit tailored in Milan, its silk threads catching the chandelier light. His Patek Philippe watch, a $2 million limited edition, gleamed on his wrist, a silent declaration of his wealth. As the founder of Technova, a Shanghai-based tech conglomerate dominating Asia's semiconductor and AI markets, Li Wei's net worth hovered at $22 billion. His entourage followed like loyal courtiers. Zhang Min, a 40-year-old venture capitalist with a razor-sharp wit and a Chanel clutch. Wang Lei, his 47-year-old CFO, whose stoic demeanor masked a ruthless financial mind, and Liu Hua, a 32-year-old socialite whose beauty and charm concealed her ambition. They were in New York to finalize a $5 billion merger with a Silicon Valley giant, and tonight's dinner was both a celebration and a power play. Li Wei's journey to this moment was a saga of grit and reinvention. Born in a dusty Hainan village, he grew up in a one-room home with a dirt floor, where meals were often rice and pickled vegetables. At 14, he repaired radios for neighbors, learning electronics by trial and error. By 18, he was in Shenzhen, selling knockoff gadgets in chaotic markets, honing his negotiation skills. His big break came at 25, when he secured a contract to supply chips to a Japanese firm, outsmarting bigger competitors. Over decades, he built Technova into a global powerhouse, but success hardened him. Wealth became his armor, and he viewed those beneath him, especially in the West, as inferior, lacking the discipline and history of his homeland. As he settled at the prime table overlooking Central Park's twinkling lights, Li Wei scanned the room with a predatory gaze. "This place," he muttered in Mandarin to his companions, "is a facade. These Americans think they know luxury, but it's all surface. No depth, no culture." Zhang Min nodded, her lips curling. "They parade their wealth like children," she said, adjusting her diamond bracelet. Wang Lei, ever practical, sipped his water, while Liu Hua laughed softly, her eyes darting to nearby tables. Their Mandarin banter was a private club, a shield they assumed impenetrable in this American setting. Li Wei's voice carried a smug certainty, his posture relaxed yet commanding, as if he owned not just the table but the entire room. His arrogance was rooted in experience. In China, he had faced and overcome countless rivals, from state-owned enterprises to cunning startups. Western executives, he believed, lacked the stamina and subtlety of their Chinese counterparts. Tonight, he was here to assert dominance, not just over the merger, but over the very idea of Western superiority. The waiter approaching his table, a young black man in a crisp uniform, barely registered in his mind, a mere servant, invisible in the grand scheme of things. As the jazz quartet shifted to a slower melody, Li Wei leaned back, ready to indulge in both food and his own sense of supremacy, unaware that the night would challenge everything he thought he knew. Jamal's introduction. Jamal Thompson approached the table with a stack of leather-bound menus, his steps measured, his smile warm but professional. At 28, he was an African-American man of medium height, his mahogany skin contrasting with the crisp white shirt and black vest of the Le Prestige uniform. His athletic build, honed from years of pickup basketball in Harlem, gave him a quiet strength, and his dark eyes held a depth that belied his role as a waiter. Jamal was no ordinary server. He was a master's student at Columbia University, studying international relations with a focus on East Asian studies, and fluent in Mandarin from 3 years in Beijing. His job at Le Prestige, grueling but well-paying, funded his education and offered a front-row seat to human behavior. Jamal's life was a testament to resilience. Orphaned at 12 when his parents died in a car accident, he was raised by his grandmother, Mama Rose, in a cramped Harlem apartment. Money was tight, but Mama Rose instilled discipline and hope, teaching him to read by candlelight during power outages. A scholarship to NYU opened doors, but it was his exchange program in Beijing that transformed him. There he immersed himself in Chinese culture, living in a modest dorm near Tsinghua University, mastering Mandarin and forming bonds with locals. He spent evenings debating Confucian philosophy over dumplings, mornings navigating bustling hutongs, and summers volunteering in rural Gansu, teaching English to children whose dreams mirrored his own. Back in the U.S., he faced the familiar sting of prejudice, microaggressions in classrooms, assumptions about his background, but he responded with grace, believing dignity was the best rebuttal. At Le Prestige, he navigated the elite world with ease, charming patrons while dodging their occasional condescension. Tonight, as he reached Li Wei's table, he sensed the group's arrogance. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice steady. "I'm Jamal, your server. May I start you with drinks? We have excellent champagnes or signature cocktails." Li Wei barely glanced up, waving a dismissive hand. "The most expensive Bordeaux. Quick," he barked in English, his Mandarin accent thick. As Jamal nodded and turned, he caught Li Wei's Mandarin aside. "Look at this one, a black waiter in a place like this, he'd be sweeping streets in Shanghai." The words hit like a jab, but Jamal's face remained neutral. He'd heard worse, from Beijing street vendors questioning his presence to American professors doubting his credentials. His time in China had taught him patience, but also the power of a well-timed response. As he headed to fetch the wine, the table's laughter echoed. The dining room of Le Prestige seemed to hold its breath as Jamal's words hung in the air, delivered in flawless Mandarin with the crisp cadence of a Beijing scholar. "If discipline means mocking those who serve you, Mr. Li, then perhaps your success is built on shaky ground." The table fell silent, a stark contrast to the raucous laughter that had filled it moments before. Li Wei's chopsticks froze mid-air, his face a mask of shock, the color draining from his cheeks as if the room's opulent glow had dimmed. Jiang Min's smirk vanished, replaced by a wide-eyed stare, her Chanel clutch slipping slightly in her lap. Wang Lei coughed, a sputter of Bordeaux catching in his throat, while Liu Ha's manicured hand paused over her wineglass, her eyes locked on Jamal in stunned admiration. The jazz quartet's soft melody, a rendition of Stardust, seemed to falter, as if the musicians sensed the shift. Nearby diners turned, their conversations trailing off, sensing a spectacle unfolding at the prime table overlooking Central Park. Sarah Klein, the journalist at the bar, leaned forward, her phone discreetly recording, its lens capturing the frozen tableau. The young couple at the adjacent table, a graphic designer named Mia and her lawyer boyfriend Ethan, exchanged glances, whispering, "Did he just speak Chinese?" The Hollywood actress at another table raised an eyebrow, her fork pausing over her salad, while the UN diplomat sipped his champagne, intrigued by the unexpected drama. The restaurant's hum, a blend of clinking glasses and murmured deals, seemed to pause, the air thick with anticipation. Jamal stood tall, his crisp white shirt and black vest immaculate, his mahogany skin catching the chandelier light. His eyes, sharp yet calm, held Li Wei's gaze, a silent challenge that demanded respect without malice. Li Wei stammered, his voice cracking as he switched to English. You speak Chinese?" The question was absurd, a reflex born of disbelief, his usual confidence unraveling. His mind raced, grappling with the impossible. This black waiter, whom he had dismissed as insignificant, had not only understood his insults, but responded with a Confucian proverb wielded with the precision of a scholar. Jiang Min's jaw tightened, her competitive instincts flaring at being upstaged. Wang Lei adjusted his glasses, his stoic facade cracking, while Liu Hua's expression softened, a flicker of respect replacing her earlier disdain. The silence stretched, a vacuum where laughter once reigned, as the table's power dynamic shifted irrevocably. Jamal nodded, his voice steady. "Yes, sir. I studied in Beijing for 3 years. I'm at Columbia now, studying Sino-American relations." His tone was polite but firm, the Beijing accent in his Mandarin deliberate, a nod to his immersion in China's capital. The words landed like a quiet thunderclap, reverberating through the group. Sarah Klein's camera caught Li Wei's stunned expression, the associate's discomfort, and Jamal's poised resolve. The young couple, Mia and Ethan, leaned closer, their whispers growing animated. "She's not just a waiter," Mia said softly, her eyes wide with admiration. The moment was a pivot, a crack in the facade of Li Wei's superiority, setting the stage for a deeper exploration of identity, culture, and humility. Jamal's background unveiled. Jamal seized the moment to reveal his story, his voice calm but resonant, as if addressing a lecture hall rather than a table of stunned billionaires. He spent 3 years in Beijing as an exchange student in Mandarin, his pronunciation flawless, infused with the idiomatic flair of a local.
I earned a degree in Chinese language and culture from NYU, and now I'm pursuing a master's at Columbia focusing on Sino-American relations. The table listened, their earlier mockery forgotten. Li Wei leaned forward, his shock giving way to curiosity, while Lu Hua's eyes sparkled with intrigue. Zheng Min crossed her arms, skeptical but silent, and Wang Lei nodded slightly, his analytical mind processing the revelation. Jamal's journey to this moment was one of grit and discovery. Born in Harlem, he had grown up in a world of cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights, where survival demanded resilience. At 12, he lost his parents in a car accident, leaving him in the care of his grandmother, Mama Rose, a retired nurse who raised him in a cramped apartment filled with love but little else. Mama Rose taught him to read by candlelight during power outages, instilling a hunger for knowledge. A scholarship to NYU opened doors, but it was his exchange program to Beijing at 19 that reshaped his world. Living in a modest dorm near Tsinghua University, he immersed himself in Chinese culture, mastering Mandarin through late-night conversations with classmates over steaming bowls of jjajangmian. In Beijing, he navigated a city of contrasts, ancient hutongs alongside gleaming skyscrapers, street vendors shouting in thick accents, professors debating philosophy with scholarly zeal. He spent summers volunteering in rural Gansu, teaching English to children in dusty schoolrooms, their eager faces mirroring his own childhood dreams. He celebrated Lunar Year with a host family, learning to wrap dumplings while firecrackers lit up the night sky. These experiences forged a deep connection to China, not just its language, but its people, its history, its soul. Back in the US, he faced new challenges. Professors who questioned his focus on East Asia, classmates who assumed his fluency was a fluke, but he pressed on, driven by a vision of bridging cultures. At Le Prestige, his job was a means to an end, funding his Columbia tuition while offering a window into human nature. As he spoke, he shared an anecdote. In Beijing, I debated philosophy with a professor who said, "Language is a bridge, but understanding is the destination. That's why I'm here, not just to serve, but to learn." His words delivered in Mandarin carried a quiet power, resonating with Lu Hua, who had faced similar skepticism at Yale. The restaurant's ambiance, soft jazz, clinking glasses, faded into the background as Jamal's story took center stage, a testament to his resilience and intellect. Li Wei's introspection. Li Wei sat back, his espresso cooling untouched, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. Jamal's retort had pierced his armor.
Deepening engagement. The atmosphere at Li Wei's table and Le Prestige had shifted dramatically, the earlier mockery replaced by a tentative respect, as Jamal's fluency and intellect dismantled their assumptions. The billionaire, sipping his espresso, his bespoke Armani suit catching the chandelier's glow, leaned forward, his curiosity now outweighing his shock. "Tell me more about your studies," he said in Mandarin, his voice softer, almost collegial, a stark contrast to his earlier disdain. The restaurant's ambiance, soft jazz, clinking glasses, and the faint scent of truffle oil faded into the background as the conversation took center stage. Jamal, clearing plates of half-eaten Wagyu beef and seafood risotto, responded with the poise of a scholar. "My thesis focuses on cultural missteps in Sino-American trade," he said in Mandarin, his Beijing accent crisp. "For instance, American firms often overlook guanxi relationships, leading to failed deals." He cited a case study from his U.S. Embassy internship in Beijing, a $2 billion tech merger that collapsed when a U.S. CEO ignored Chinese face-saving protocols, demanding concessions in a public meeting. They lost trust because they didn't understand the value of patience. Wang Lei, the CFO, nodded, his stoic facade softening. "We've seen that," he said in Mandarin. "Westerners push too hard, too fast, and it costs millions." Lu Hua heard Yale education resonating with Jamal's insights, added, "I faced similar issues in Connecticut. The Americans saw my accent, not my ideas." Her voice carried a newfound openness, her earlier condescension gone. Zhang Min, however, sat back, her arms crossed, her Chanel dress pristine, but her expression guarded, her competitive nature bristling at Jamal's command of the table. The dialogue deepened, touching on Confucian principles in modern Chinese business, the impact of U.S. tariffs on tech exports, and the role of cultural diplomacy in global markets. Jamal shared an anecdote from Beijing, debating trade policy with a Tsinghua professor over jasmine tea, learning how cultural nuance shaped negotiations. His insights, grounded in both scholarship and lived experience, captivated the group. Nearby diners, sensing the shift, leaned closer. The young couple, Mia and Ethan, whispered excitedly, Mia noting, "He's schooling them." Sarah Klein, the journalist, scribbled furiously, her phone still recording, her instincts telling her this was more than a viral moment. It was a story of transformation. Jamal's ability to navigate the conversation, switching seamlessly between Mandarin and English, was a masterclass in cultural fluency. He cited a successful joint venture between a Shenzhen startup and a Silicon Valley firm, driven by mutual respect for each other's traditions. "It's about listening," he said, "not just speaking." Li Wei nodded, his earlier arrogance replaced by a flicker of admiration. The restaurant's hum, laughter from a nearby table of influencers, the clinking of a champagne flute seemed distant as the table became an intellectual arena, a space where a waiter held court with a billionaire. The moment was a bridge, fragile but growing stronger as prejudice gave way to dialogue, setting the stage for the confrontation that would solidify this shift. Zhang Min's challenge. Zhang Min's patience snapped, her competitive streak unable to tolerate Jamal's command of the conversation. She leaned forward, her diamond bracelet glinting, and switched to English, her tone sharp. "So you're an expert now," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Must be nice to lecture us while pouring water." The jab was meant to reassert her status, to remind everyone that Jamal, despite his fluency, was still a waiter. The table tensed, the air crackling with renewed conflict. Li Wei's eyes narrowed, Wang Lei adjusted his glasses, and Luo Hua frowned, sensing Zhang Min's insecurity. Jamal, setting down a fresh carafe of water, met her gaze with calm resolve, his mahogany skin catching the candlelight, his expression unshaken. In Mandarin, he responded, "Expert? No. But as Sun Tzu said, know thyself, know thy enemy. Understanding prevents unnecessary battles." The Art of War quote, delivered with the precision of a Beijing scholar, landed like a well-aimed dart. Li Wei chuckled, the tension easing slightly, his respect for Jamal deepening. Zhang Min's face flushed, her attempt to regain control thwarted. Her backstory unfolded in her mind. A Shanghai native who clawed her way into venture capital, she had fought to be taken seriously in a male-dominated industry. Being outshined by a waiter, no matter how educated, stung her pride. Yet Jamal's calm defiance forced her to confront her own biases, a mirror she wasn't ready to face. The restaurant's other patrons noticed the exchange. Mia, the graphic designer, whispered to Ethan, "She's jealous, but he's unstoppable." Sarah Klein's pen moved faster, capturing Zhang Min's challenge and Jamal's response. The Hollywood actress at another table, overhearing the Mandarin, raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the drama. Maria, Jamal's fellow server, caught his eye from across the room, offering a supportive nod as she balanced a tray of desserts. Jamal's ability to hold his ground, not with anger, but with intellect, shifted the table's dynamic further. Luo Hua, breaking the silence, said in Mandarin, "I was underestimated at Yale too. People judged my appearance, not my mind." Her admission, vulnerable and sincere, bridged a gap, aligning her with Jamal's experience. Zhang Min's challenge, though sharp, was a catalyst. It forced the table to confront their assumptions head-on, paving the way for a deeper connection. Jamal continued serving, his movements fluid, but his presence commanded respect. The jazz quartet shifted to a slower tune, blue and green, its melancholy notes underscoring the moment's weight. The confrontation, though brief, was a turning point, exposing vulnerabilities and setting the stage for reconciliation. Jamal's poise, rooted in years of navigating prejudice in Harlem and Beijing, proved stronger than Jiang Min's insecurity, marking a shift from conflict to potential understanding. Restaurant reactions. The ripple effects of Jamal's response spread through Le Prestige, transforming the prime table's drama to a restaurant-wide spectacle. Diners at nearby tables, initially drawn by the group's earlier laughter, now watched with rapt attention. Mia and Ethan, the young couple, were particularly captivated. Mia, a graphic designer with dreams of studying abroad, whispered, "He's so calm, but so powerful." Ethan nodded, a lawyer, adding, "This is what real confidence looks like." Their admiration grew, inspired by Jamal's stand against prejudice. They began discussing their own plans, Mia considering a Mandarin course, influenced by the unfolding scene. Sarah Klein, the journalist, was in her element, her phone discreetly recording as she jotted down quotes. Her instinct screamed that this was a story of cultural collision and redemption, one that could resonate globally. She sketched Jamal's profile in her mind, a Harlem native, a Beijing scholar, a waiter who humbled a billionaire. The Hollywood actress at another table, overhearing the Mandarin, raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the drama. Maria, the Latina server, navigated the dining room with a tray of cocktails, catching Jamal's eye. She had faced her own share of patron snobbery, from Wall Street types dismissing her accent to influencers ignoring her service. Seeing Jamal hold his ground filled her with pride. "You got this, Jay," she mouthed, her grin encouraging. The kitchen, a chaotic symphony of sizzling pans and shouted orders, buzzed with whispers about the incident. Pierre, the sommelier, overheard a chef say, "That waiter just shut down a billionaire." The staff's camaraderie, a hidden backbone of Le Prestige, rallied behind Jamal, their respect for him deepening. The restaurant's atmosphere, a blend of opulence and tension, amplified the moment. The chandeliers cast prismatic light, the velvet drapes framed the view of Central Park, and the jazz quartet's notes wove through the air, creating a cinematic backdrop. Diners began whispering about Jamal, some pulling out phones to search for context, unaware that Sarah's video would soon make him a viral sensation. The reactions, from awe to curiosity, underscored the story's universal appeal. A man underestimated, rising above prejudice with grace. This collective response set the stage for the confrontation's resolution, as the restaurant became a microcosm of the world watching a lesson unfold. Li Wei's apology. As the meal neared the end, the $50,000 bill arrived, presented on a silver tray with Le Prestige's embossed logo. Li Wei, his espresso now cold, looked at Jamal with a new perspective. The billionaire's earlier arrogance had crumbled, replaced by a reluctant humility. He had mocked a man he assumed was beneath him, only to be schooled by his intellect and dignity. In Mandarin, he said softly, "I misjudged you. I'm sorry." The words were simple but heavy, a rare admission from a man who rarely admitted fault. He slid the bill back, adding a 50% tip, $2,500, writing on the receipt, "For the lesson." The gesture was both an apology and a tribute, a recognition of Jamal's impact. Jamal nodded, his expression gracious.